It was supposed to be the perfect relationship. I remember the first time I met her, how effortlessly we clicked. We shared so many interests, from movies to music, and our conversations flowed naturally. The way she smiled when I said something funny, the way she looked at me like I was the only one in the room. Everything felt right. We were young, ambitious, and full of dreams, and for a while, it felt like we were building something truly special together. At first, we were inseparable. Our weekends were filled with spontaneous road trips, long walks in the park, and hours spent talking about our hopes for the future. We supported each other's ambitions, encouraged each other to grow, and celebrated every little success. It felt like the world was ours for the taking, and no challenge could break the bond we had. I honestly thought we were made for each other. I could see a future with her, marriage, kids, the whole package. The kind of life people dream about when they think of true love. But over time, things started to change. It wasn't dramatic at first, just small things, like a shift in how she looked at me or how she spoke to me. It wasn't that she was mean, but the spark we had seemed to dim a little. The conversations that once flowed so effortlessly became a bit forced, and the affection I used to get seemed to fade. I thought maybe it was just life getting in the way. Work, stress, the usual stuff. After all, we were both busy with our careers, and sometimes relationships go through phases, right? But then the signs became clearer, more difficult to ignore. I started to notice her checking her phone more often, hiding texts or conversations that seemed too quick to glance at. At first, I brushed it off. She's busy, I thought. Maybe she's planning something for me, or maybe it's work. But the frequency of it, the secret of nature, it began to eat away at me. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I refused to believe it. I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. The unease began to grow. I noticed she was more distant, and when we did talk, it felt like we were talking past each other. There was no longer that deep connection. I tried to talk to her about it, but she'd brush it off with a smile and a promise that everything was fine. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to the idea of us being that perfect couple we once were, but somewhere deep down, I knew something was changing, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of something that would shake everything I believed about love, trust, and even myself. This was the moment I had no idea would lead to the discovery that would change my life forever. It started with a small, seemingly innocent moment. I came home from work one evening a little earlier than usual. I didn't expect her to be home yet, but I thought I'd surprise her. As I opened the front door, I heard her voice in the living room. It sounded like she was talking to someone. I didn't think much of it, assuming she was on the phone with a friend. But then, as I got closer, I could hear her laughter. It wasn't the kind of laugh we shared. Something felt off about it. I stepped into the living room, and there she was, sitting on the couch, holding her phone close to her face. She quickly dropped it down when she saw me, and the smile on her face faded. She looked surprised, like she didn't expect me home yet. But what caught my attention wasn't just the oddness of the situation. It was a feeling that hit me deep in my gut. The way she looked at me wasn't the same. There was a distance in her eyes I couldn't explain, like she had been caught doing something she knew she shouldn't. I chalked it up to my imagination. Of course. I told myself I was just being paranoid. But from that moment on, things started to feel different. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There were little things at first, like the way she would glance at her phone whenever it buzzed, then quickly put it face down on the table, or how she'd take longer to respond to my texts, sometimes hours before replying, whereas before she'd always text me back almost immediately. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, but the more it happened, the more I felt something was off. I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind. She was probably just busy with work or something personal. I reasoned. But then came the night that everything came crashing down. I came home late from a work event one night, and as I entered the house, I could hear the faint sound of music and soft talking coming from the kitchen. My first thought was that she was having a conversation with a friend or family member. I figured I'd join them, but as I got closer, I saw her through the open doorway. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her back to me, but the voice I heard wasn't from a friend. It was a man's voice. She was laughing with him, talking to him in that familiar way, like they shared a joke I wasn't on. I stood frozen for a second, unsure of what to do. My heart began to race as I listened more closely. I couldn't make out all the words, but one thing stood out. She was telling him about an old memory from when they were together. I didn't need to hear any more. My mind started racing, and I couldn't stop myself from feeling sick to my stomach. Every little doubt, every nagging feeling, suddenly came rushing back to me. I walked into the room and stood there quietly for a second, not knowing what to say or do. When she saw me, her face instantly froze, and the man on the phone went quiet. She looked at me, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open, like she had been caught doing something she knew was wrong. I asked her who she was talking to, but the words didn't come out as calm as I wanted them to. There was an edge in my voice that I couldn't hide. She hesitated, then said it was just a friend from work, but her voice cracked, and I knew she wasn't being truthful. The way she avoided looking me in the eyes, the way she seemed so nervous, only made it worse. I pressed her further, asking who it was. If it was a friend, why did she act so strange? Finally, she admitted it. She told me it was him, the ex from her past, the one she had always spoken about in passing, but I'd never really thought much of. I remember feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My legs almost gave out as the truth hit me. I wanted to yell, to scream, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, just staring at her. She had been talking to him, reconnecting with him behind my back, all while telling me everything was fine. And now, I found out she had been hiding it from me. She apologized, said it was a mistake, that she didn't mean to hurt me. But hearing her words only made the situation worse. She was sorry, but not sorry enough to tell me the truth. She was sorry, but not enough to stop talking to him behind my back. In that moment, I realized that the woman I thought I knew, the woman I trusted, had been hiding something huge from me. It wasn't just the affair itself. It was a betrayal, the dishonesty, and the complete lack of respect for everything we had built together. I didn't know what to say next. I stood there, my mind racing, my heart breaking. All I could think about was how she had allowed this to happen. How had it gone this far, without me noticing? How could she do this to me? I was crushed, not just by the affair, but by the way she seemed to have no real remorse, no understanding of the pain she had caused. We didn't speak for a long time after that. I sat down on the couch, trying to process everything, while she stood there, silent and unsure what to say next. My head was spinning with questions, with confusion, with anger. How had everything gone so wrong? How had I missed all the signs? And why didn't she respect me enough to be honest? But one thing was clear. This was the beginning of a change I hadn't expected. I was no longer the man who believed in blind trust and unconditional love. I was a man who had just been broken by the person I loved the most. That was the moment I knew things would never be the same. The discovery of her betrayal marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. One where I had to figure out what to do next and, more importantly, how to rebuild my own sense of self. The worst part of the whole situation wasn't just that she had been talking to him again. It wasn't even that she had lied to my face for so long. No, the thing that hit me hardest, that cut deeper than anything else, was when she compared me to him. It happened a few days after the confrontation. We had barely spoken in that time. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Anger, betrayal, sadness. But I knew I couldn't let things continue like this. I needed answers, even though I wasn't sure I was ready to hear them. I needed to understand what had happened, what went wrong, and why she had done this to us. So I sat her down one evening. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to talk. But as soon as she saw the serious look on my face, she knew it wasn't going to be a regular conversation. She sat there nervously, her hands twisting in her lap, avoiding eye contact. I need to know why this happened, I said, my voice calm but steady. Why him? Why now? Why did you go behind my back? She took a deep breath, like she was preparing for something difficult to say, and then, without hesitation, she started talking. It's not you. It's just, things have been different between us for a while, and I guess I started to feel like I was missing something. I could hear the hesitation in her voice, but I couldn't stop myself from pressing further. So you thought going back to your ex would fix it? Her eyes flickered, and for a second, I thought she was going to say something else, something that would make sense. But instead, she just nodded, almost like she was ashamed to admit it, but she knew I deserved the truth. It's not about him, she said quickly. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. With him, everything was simpler. He always made me feel good about myself, and we had this connection that I guess I just missed it. I froze. So you missed him, I said, barely believing my own voice. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at the ground, the guilt washing over her face. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. But with him, I didn't feel lost. The word stung like nothing else. Lost, I repeated, almost as if I couldn't comprehend them. So, because I made you feel lost, you went back to him? She nodded again, this time a bit more sheepishly. I guess I just felt like we were different. Like I couldn't be the person I used to be when I was with you. With him, I could be myself. He didn't have expectations. He didn't make me feel like I had to keep up. That was when she said it. The thing I never expected. The thing that made me feel so small, so insignificant. It almost knocked the wind out of me. I guess he was better. He never made me feel insecure or unsure. I don't know how to explain it, but he made me feel like I was enough. Her words hung in the air like a heavy weight, suffocating every breath I took. I didn't know how to respond at first. I wanted to scream, to ask how she could compare me to someone else, how she could dismiss everything we had built together as if it meant nothing. But all I could do was sit there, staring at her, fighting to keep my composure. So, you're telling me that because of me, because of what I did or didn't do, I wasn't enough for you? You had to go back to him because he made you feel better about yourself? She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped herself. It was like she realized, in that moment, how damaging her words had been. She didn't know how to undo the damage she had already caused. I didn't mean it like that, she said quietly. I just felt like I wasn't happy with us anymore. With him, it wasn't like that. It was easy. The comparison was brutal, and it hit me harder than I ever could have imagined. All those years together, all the memories we made, the promises we shared, none of it was enough for her. She was telling me that I wasn't good enough. The man she had married, the person who had been there for her through everything, wasn't able to measure up to the man from her past. It felt like everything I had worked so hard for, our relationship, our connection, had been reduced to nothing in a single sentence. The worst part wasn't even that she was comparing me to him, though. It was that she didn't see me for who I was anymore. To her, I had become just another person who made her feel insecure or unsure, while I had been the safe, comforting choice. Someone who never pushed her to grow, never challenged her, never asked her to become more than what she was. But that was exactly the problem. I didn't want to be someone who made her feel comfortable in her complacency. I didn't want to be the one who let her stagnate. I wanted to push her to be her best self, to grow alongside me, to build something real. And for all the faults in our relationship, I thought we were doing that. But in her eyes, it was a mistake. That's when the anger started to rise. I was furious, not just at her for what she had done, but at myself for ever allowing her to feel like I wasn't enough, for thinking that what we had could be fixed by just going back to someone who had been in her past. I didn't want to be part of someone's comfort zone. I wanted to be someone who made her feel alive, who made her want to be better. But I realized that wasn't what she wanted. Her comparison wasn't just a blow to my pride. It was a blow to who I was as a person. It made me question whether everything I thought we had was real or just a phase for her. And in that moment, I knew things would never be the same between us. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of someone from her past. I couldn't keep fighting for something that wasn't worth fighting for anymore. That moment, sitting across from her as she explained how I hadn't made her feel enough, was when everything clicked. It wasn't just a betrayal that hit me hard. It was a realization that I had allowed myself to be treated like this. I had given so much of myself, emotionally, mentally, and physically, and yet here I was being told that I wasn't enough, that no matter how much I loved her, no matter how much I supported her, I still fell short in her eyes. But somewhere in that conversation, something shifted inside me. It wasn't a switch that I flipped all at once, but a slow-burning realization. It wasn't just about her and her choices. It was about me, about how I had allowed myself to become so wrapped up in her, in trying to fix things, that I lost sight of what I deserved. I had been so focused on making her happy, on keeping the peace, that I had stopped thinking about my own happiness, my own worth. I didn't say anything in the moment. I just sat there, letting the weight of her words sink in. But in my mind, I was already starting to make decisions. The more I thought about everything she had said, the comparison to her ex, the betrayal, the way she made me feel small, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep fighting for a relationship where I wasn't valued. I couldn't keep putting my heart on the line for someone who didn't see me for who I truly was. I didn't know exactly what I needed to do yet, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let this slide, couldn't let it just pass as another argument or mistake. This was bigger than that. I had to take control, even if it meant walking away from her. The first step was taking a moment for myself. I left the house that evening, telling her I needed space. She tried to stop me, tried to convince me that we could work things out, but I wasn't listening anymore. I couldn't keep having the same conversations over and over, convincing myself that things would change when I knew deep down that they wouldn't. I needed to clear my head, to think about what I wanted, not what she wanted, not what we had once hoped for, but what I deserved. I went to a close friend's place for a few days. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get some distance from the situation and start processing everything. The first night was hard. My mind kept circling back to her words, her comparison, and the gut-wrenching feeling of betrayal. But as the days went by, I started to find clarity. I realized that I had been holding onto something that was never truly there anymore. The love we had once shared had eroded over time, replaced by unspoken resentment, lies, and unmet needs. I needed to break free from that. I began to think about what I could control. The first thing that came to mind was the house. We had bought it together, but now it felt like a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. It was a place where love had lived, but also where all the hurt and betrayal had festered. I couldn't keep walking through those doors every day, feeling like I was still living in the past. I knew I had to take a physical step toward taking control of my life again, even if it meant making difficult decisions. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew I couldn't keep allowing her to share space in my life if she wasn't fully invested in making things work. I called a locksmith the next morning. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt right. Changing the locks on the house wasn't just about protecting my physical space. It was about taking control of my emotional space, too. It was a way to reclaim my independence, to take back some semblance of power that had been taken from me. When I hung up the phone, I felt a rush of relief, like I was finally making a decision that was about me and my well-being. That afternoon, the locksmith came over. While he worked on the locks, I packed a bag. I wasn't sure if I was ready to leave for good, but I needed to make a clean break. I needed to show myself that I could walk away from a situation that was hurting me. When my wife came home later, she immediately noticed the changes. The new locks, the suitcase by the door. She asked what was going on, but there was no confusion in my voice when I explained. I'm taking control of my life. I told her, I can't keep living in this situation. It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for us. She tried to apologize again, to convince me that things would change, that we could fix it. But I wasn't listening. I had made my decision. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I was angry, sad, frustrated, and relieved all at once. But above everything else, I was starting to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Empowered. I was no longer waiting for her to change or for things to magically fix themselves. I was taking charge of my life, even if it meant walking away from a relationship that once felt like everything. I didn't have all the answers yet, and I still didn't know exactly what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. This was my turning point. I wasn't going to let myself be someone else's second choice anymore. I wasn't going to let myself be compared to anyone else. I had put myself first, no matter how difficult it was. And in that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing for me. The days that followed were filled with a mix of emotions, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to sit around and let things stay the same. I had spent too much time waiting for her to change, for the relationship to magically fix itself. But I had come to realize that I couldn't depend on someone else to make things right. I had to be the one to take action, to take control of my own life again. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be a lot of difficult decisions ahead, but I was ready to face them head on. I started by focusing on myself. The first thing I did was spend more time with my friends and family. It was something I had neglected during the time I had been so focused on my relationship. I had lost touch with the people who mattered most to me, the ones who had always been there when things got tough. They had supported me in ways my wife couldn't, and I had forgotten how important that was. Reconnecting with them felt like breathing fresh air after being stuck in a room for too long. One evening, I called up my best friend, John. We hadn't really spoken much since the relationship had become strained, but I knew he would understand. I needed someone to talk to, someone who knew me well enough to give me honest advice. "John, I'm lost, man," I admitted when we met up for drinks. "I don't know what to do." She's apologized, but I can't just forget everything that happened. And I'm not even sure if I can trust her anymore. John listened patiently, nodding as I spoke. "It sounds like you've already made your decision," he said, taking a sip from his drink. "You know deep down what you need to do, but you have to be ready to face the consequences of that decision." He was right. Deep inside, I knew that the relationship had reached its breaking point. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, my peace of mind, and my future. I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't serving me anymore, no matter how hard it was to let go. The next day, I made another tough decision. I contacted a lawyer. I hadn't wanted to go down that road, but I knew I needed to protect myself. I wasn't sure what the next steps would be, but I needed someone to help me navigate the mess I was about to face. I couldn't do it alone anymore. I needed professional advice on how to handle the separation, the house, and everything else that came with it. Meeting the lawyer was a surreal experience. As I sat in their office, explaining my situation, I felt a mix of fear and relief. This was real now. I was no longer in a relationship. I was preparing to move on from it, and that meant making difficult decisions. The lawyer talked me through the process, explained what happened next, and answered all my questions about assets, property, and custody. Even though we didn't have children, it was still a relief to have someone guide me through the process. I left the meeting with a sense of clarity. This was the next step, the right step, in moving forward with my life. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I stayed at a friend's place, wanting to give myself some distance from the house and from her. I needed time to think, to process, to make sure I was doing what was best for me. That night, as I lay on the couch in my friend's apartment, I realized something important. I was finally beginning to heal. It was painful, but it was necessary. The next morning, I knew it was time. I couldn't keep avoiding it. I went back to the house and found her sitting in the living room, nervously flipping through a magazine. When she saw me, her face lit up for a second, like she thought everything was going to be okay. But I knew better now. I wasn't going to let this drag on any longer. I've been thinking. I started sitting down across from her, and I've made my decision. I'm moving forward. I'm taking control of my life, and that means we need to separate. Her face fell immediately. "What do you mean, separate?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. "You don't mean divorce, do you?" I took a deep breath. I'm not sure what the future holds. But right now, I don't think we should stay in the same house. We've been through too much, and I can't keep pretending that things will magically fix themselves. I'm not happy, and I can't keep putting myself through this. She started to cry, and part of me wanted to reach out to comfort her, but I knew I couldn't. Not this time. I had to stay firm. I had to protect myself. "I'm sorry," she whispered, wiping away her tears. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know what I was doing." "I know you didn't," I replied quietly. "But the truth is, I've been hurting for a long time. I can't do this anymore. I deserve better than this." I stood up to leave, my heart heavy, but my mind made up. This was it. No more going back. No more hoping things would change on their own. I had finally taken the first real step toward taking back my life. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and difficult conversations. But each day that passed, I felt a little stronger. I had to pack my things, move out, and face the harsh reality of what our relationship had become. It was painful, but it was necessary. As I walked out of the house for the final time, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I was closing a chapter of my life, but I was opening another one. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew that by taking action, I was giving myself a chance to heal. I was giving myself a chance to move on, to start fresh. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own destiny. The days after I moved out were some of the hardest I had ever faced. It wasn't just about the loss of the relationship. It was about realizing just how much of myself I had given away over the years. I had spent so long trying to fix things, trying to make her happy, that I had lost sight of who I was. Now, standing on my own, I felt like a completely different person, someone who had been to the fire and was finally coming out stronger on the other side. The first thing I noticed was how much quieter my life had become. For the longest time, my life had been consumed by our relationship, by her needs, her moods, her desires. Every decision I made, every step I took, had been weighed against what she would think or feel. Now, in the silence of my own apartment, I realized how much space I had lost inside myself, how much of my own voice had been drowned out by trying to please someone else. For the first time in years, I had the room to breathe. I could wake up in the morning and think about what I wanted, what I needed, without anyone else's expectations looming over me. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. But slowly, I began to remember who I was before the relationship. I started to rediscover my interests, my hobbies, my sense of self. I'd always loved photography, but it was something I had pushed aside as I got caught up in the routine of everyday life. Now, with more time on my hands, I picked up my camera again just to see what would happen. I started taking walks in the park, capturing moments of nature, street scenes, and candid shots of people. It felt like rediscovering a part of myself that had been dormant for far too long. I also reconnected with old friends. Friends I had neglected when I was so focused on my relationship. Spending time with them reminded me of who I had been before I got tangled in the web of trying to fix things. We went out for drinks, laughed at old inside jokes, and caught up on life. It felt good to remember the person I used to be, confident, carefree, and full of life. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing the reflection of someone I hadn't recognized in years. But the most important part of my transformation wasn't just about rediscovering my hobbies or reconnecting with friends. It was about learning to be okay with being alone. For the longest time, I had feared being alone. I had believed that I needed someone by my side to feel complete, to feel validated. But now, after everything I'd been through, I realized that I didn't need anyone to define me. I was enough on my own. The first few weeks were difficult, and there were moments when I found myself doubting my decision. I missed the companionship, the shared moments. But slowly, those feelings faded, replaced by a new sense of independence. I was starting to enjoy my own company, to find peace in the quiet moments, and to appreciate the freedom that came with making my own choices without anyone else's influence. I began to focus on my physical health, something I had neglected during the last months of the relationship. I started exercising regularly, going for runs, hitting the gym. It wasn't just about looking better. It was about feeling better, about taking care of myself, about regaining control over my body and my life. With each workout, I felt a little stronger, a little more confident. I was rebuilding not just my life, but myself. One of the most powerful changes, though, was how I began to shift my mindset. In the past, I had been so focused on fixing a relationship, on trying to save it, that I had forgotten about my own needs. I had allowed myself to become a shadow of who I used to be. But now, I was learning to put myself first. I began to set boundaries, to say no when I needed to, and to stop apologizing for taking care of my own well-being. It felt empowering to reclaim my power, to stop being afraid of disappointing others in order to protect my own peace. The more I embraced this new mindset, the more I realized just how much I had been holding on to out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of making the wrong decision. But by letting go of those fears, I started to create a life that was authentic, to who I was. I was no longer living for someone else's approval. I was living for me. One night, I sat down and wrote a letter to myself. I didn't plan on sending it to anyone. It was just for me. I wrote about everything I had learned, the pain I had gone through, and the strength I had found in the process. I wrote about the lessons I had learned about love, about relationships, and about myself. It was cathartic, freeing, and it helped me see how far I had come. The person I was now was not the same person I had been when I was married. I had changed, and I had grown in ways I never imagined possible. I had learned to trust myself again, to stand up for myself, and to know that I deserved more than just scraps from someone else's love. I wasn't perfect, but I was whole, and that was enough. As I looked ahead to the future, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in years. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what would come next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking on a path that was truly my own. I wasn't relying on anyone else to validate my worth. I was learning to love myself, to take care of myself, and to believe in the future I was building. In the end, this journey wasn't just about any relationship. It was about rediscovering who I was, learning to be strong on my own, and understanding that my happiness came from within, not from anyone else's actions or approval. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And I knew that no matter what happened next, I was ready to face it with confidence and courage. As the months passed, life began to take on a new rhythm. The initial shock of the separation had worn off, and I found myself slowly adjusting to a life that was no longer consumed by the toxic weight of the past. Every morning, I woke up feeling a little more grounded, a little more at peace with the choices I had made. I had taken control of my life, and though the process had been painful, I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. There were still moments when I felt the sting of loss, late-night thoughts about what could have been, or fleeting memories of times we had shared before everything fell apart. But those moments became less frequent, and when they came, they didn't hold the same power over me. I had learned that it was okay to mourn, to feel sadness for the relationship that had ended, but I also realized that I didn't need to let that sadness define me. It was just a part of my story, not the whole of it. I started focusing more on my future. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could dream again. The world had once felt small, like I was stuck in a loop of trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Now, everything seemed open and full of possibility. I had let go of the past, and with that, a weight had lifted from my shoulders. I took a trip alone, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the courage for. It was something small, just a weekend getaway to a small beach town, but it felt like a big step. The journey wasn't about escaping from my problems. It was about learning to be comfortable with myself, to enjoy my own company, and to be okay with the silence that had once felt so deafening. That weekend, I found myself sitting on the beach at sunset, watching the waves crash gently against the shore. For the first time in months, I felt a deep sense of peace. I thought about everything that had led me here, the pain, the heartbreak, the mistakes, but I also thought about how far I had come. I wasn't the same person I had been when I left. I had grown stronger, more resilient. And while I would always carry the scars of the past, I had learned how to live with them, how to let them be part of my story, without letting them define me. I knew I wasn't done with my journey. Healing was a straight path, and there would be bumps along the way. But I also knew I was on the right track. I had learned how to set boundaries, how to protect myself emotionally, and how to trust that the future would unfold as it was meant to, even if I didn't have all the answers yet. I also knew that I wasn't in a hurry to rush into another relationship. For the first time in a long time, I was okay with being single. I was learning to love myself, to put my needs first, and to build a life that was centered around my own happiness. I no longer felt the pressure to find someone else to complete me. I was whole on my own, and that was something I hadn't truly understood until now. But even though I wasn't rushing into anything, I did open myself up to the possibility of love again, this time with a new sense of clarity. I knew that I wasn't looking for someone to fix me or to validate my worth. I was looking for someone who would be an equal partner, someone who would add to my life, not complete it. I wasn't willing to settle for anything less. I had learned the hard way that I deserved better, and I wasn't going to let fear or loneliness cloud my judgment again. As I settled into my new life, I felt a growing sense of pride. I had come through one of the toughest chapters of my life and come out on the other side stronger, wiser, and more aware of my worth. There were still challenges ahead, moments of doubt, times when I questioned whether I had made the right choices. But I now understood that those moments didn't have to control me. I had the power to decide how I responded, how I moved forward. One evening, I sat down to write in my journal, something I hadn't done in a while. I reflected on everything I had been through, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the transformation, and I realized something that made me smile. I was finally in a place where I could say, with confidence, that I was proud of who I had become. I had faced my fears, embraced my pain, and used it to rebuild my life. I had learned that my happiness didn't depend on anyone else's approval or love. It came from within, and that was the greatest lesson of all. Looking ahead, I didn't know exactly what my future would hold. I wasn't sure when or if I would find love again, but I knew that I was okay on my own. I was no longer afraid of being alone, of facing the world without a partner. I was learning to trust myself, to believe in my own strength, and to embrace the unknown with courage. The road to healing had been long, and at times it had felt like it would never end. But now I could see it for what it was, a journey of self-discovery, and I knew that no matter where it took me next, I was ready. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much my life has changed in such a short time. A few months ago, I was trapped in a relationship that was slowly draining me, holding on to something that wasn't working, and convincing myself that things would get better if I just tried harder. I had put so much energy into fixing someone else, trying to change a situation that wasn't meant to be changed, that I had lost sight of what truly mattered, myself. But in the end, everything happened exactly the way it needed to. The hurt, the betrayal, the disappointment, it all led me to this point. And while I wouldn't wish pain on anyone, I've come to realize that it's often through hardship that we find our greatest strength. The darkest moments, as painful as they are, can teach us the most important lessons. The greatest lesson I've learned is that I am enough. I don't need anyone else to complete me. I am whole on my own. For the longest time, I had sought validation outside myself, through my partner's approval, through their love. I had believed that someone else's affection could fill the emptiness I felt inside. But I've come to understand that true happiness starts within. It's about accepting myself, flaws and all, and realizing that I don't need anyone else to determine my worth. The road to healing was not easy. It took time, effort, and a lot of self-reflection. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But every step I took, every decision I made to move forward, brought me closer to a place of peace. I have learned that moving on doesn't mean forgetting or erasing the past. It means accepting it, learning from it, and using it as fuel to become a stronger version of myself. Now, as I stand here, looking ahead, I feel ready for whatever comes next. I'm not in a rush to find love again, but I'm open to it. This time, with a clearer sense of what I deserve. I know I'm not looking for someone to complete me or fix me. I'm looking for someone who will walk beside me, support me, and share in the journey, just as I will with them. I've taken control of my life, and though the past will always be a part of me, it no longer defines me. I know that my future is in my hands. I'm stronger, wiser, and more self-aware than I've ever been. And most importantly, I now understand that my happiness comes within, not from someone else. So, as I continue to heal and grow, I carry with me the lessons of the past, but I don't let them weigh me down. Instead, I let them propel me forward into a future filled with possibility. I've learned that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest transformations, and I'm finally at a place where I can embrace whatever comes next with open arms.